Well, everyone, welcome back to Tea on Tuesday.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there.
Remember, as you come on board, you are muted. So if you wish to say anything, please be sure to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. I'm happy that we're all here today.
Good afternoon.
You know,
Hi,
Hello,
everybody.
everybody.
Hello.
Why did I miss this? What did
Well,
you miss?
we are back. We are back for at least the rest of the year.
Yay.
But we're going to do four sessions here in the month of Elul, leading up to Rosh Hashanah. And then we will go back to our regular potpourri discussions on Tuesdays. Let me just get some of the fan out of the way there. This is also being streamed live to our YouTube channel where it will be recorded. So those who would like to follow with our discussion will be able to do so on our YouTube channel. There will be a link on our homepage linking the YouTube video there on the homepage on our webpage for the High Holidays, so that if you wish to return to this discussion or wish to pass this off to friends, you will be able to do so. It's a pleasure to have so many of us back together again. I hope everybody's been staying safe and healthy and cool during this incredible hot summer.
Hey, Rabbi, how are you doing?
Thank you. Doing well. Keeping my distance, wearing my masks, and otherwise having a busy time getting ready for the holidays. Reposition things a little bit.
Good.
I am consuming my gifted tea, my buttermint tea, which is quite refreshing, even warm, even hot on a hot day. It's quite refreshing. Thank you, Lynette, for the buttermint tea. So we are in the month of Elul, the month that precedes the month of Tishrei, which of course is when Rosh Hashanah begins. And so as part of our way of creating a more meaningful kind of high holiday experience for our congregants, we have not only daily emails going out with thoughts and meditations for the month of Elul, but we have four special discussions set aside dealing with the themes of the high holidays. Today, we're going to take a look at the shofar and explore some of the deeper meanings of the shofar. Also have a chance to see how a shofar is made. This is a YouTube video, so we'll learn how the shofar is made and the sounds of the shofar, but looking towards finding a deeper meaning to these sounds and the deeper meaning to even the actual shape of the shofar. So I will share my screen here in just a moment. I realize I've got a whole bunch of things open here that I don't need. Sorry, I should have shut these things down beforehand. Definitely want to get rid of the email.
Oh, that's so fun.
So we don't have Dean interruptions. Much better. Cool. All right, let me share my screen with you and we will have a chance to take a look at the shofar. Oh, somebody else coming on board. All right, excellent. All right, about the shofar. Of course, many of us have seen the shofar. Many of us have heard the shofar. As a matter of fact, you know what? Before we begin, let's do this. When I would like for you all to talk a little bit about your experience of the shofar. When you hear the shofar sounds, what goes through your mind? How are you feeling? And if you want to raise your hand, I'll call on you. If you just want to announce it and shout it out, go ahead and we'll silence others. Be sure to unmute yourself when you speak. But let's start with a reflection, your reflections. What does it mean to you and how do you feel when you hear the sound of the shofar? Yes, Sergio.
Whenever I hear the sound of the shofar, I get a deep sense that God is calling me and telling me to get ready for whatever event He has planned for me. And so that is what I get from that.
Great, great. Thank you. Peggy.
It's like an announcement.
I feel like I'm on a mountaintop and there's a call to wake up from mountain to mountain throughout time into ancient times till now.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else would like to share? Harry.
Sorry, had it on mute. If it is sounded properly without an error, it just sends a chill through me. And it's always been that way and I can't explain it. And it's almost like someone hitting me in the middle of the head saying, let me get your attention and start listening. But if it's not played well, I have to honestly admit that I chuckle.
Certainly. Certainly. Would anybody else like to share some thoughts?
Yeah,
Flo?
go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Ellie. Go ahead, Ellie.
Oh, I was gonna say, since I blow the shofar, and I know the rabbi does too, when I hear other people blowing it, if it's good, I say, gee, I hope I can do it that good. I don't get a sense from anything else other than I hope I do it well when I'm gonna be blowing it again. I get the sense that I'm blowing this shofar and I have to make the sound good for everybody else.
Great. Thank you. Flo?
Just like when I went to Israel and I touched the wall, it was a feeling of being connected to something greater and to a magnificent past, something that's been going on for a long time. So when I hear the shofar, I'm feeling connected to my Jewish ancestors.
Thank you.
For me,
Lynette?
it's like a wake-up call, to come, there's something important going to happen or happening. So it's a wake-up call. If you need an FYI, or I'll tell you later. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Lynette. Chris?
What I'm thinking or what I'm feeling is I get a shiver that goes from the base of my spine to the top of my head. And I'm going, my gosh, this is still happening.
After all these centuries. Cool. Thank you. Other thoughts about your feelings, reflections when you hear the sound of the shofar? Peter, you'll have to unmute yourself, Peter.
Are we muted?
Did I do that successfully?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Well, when I hear the shofar, like many things in the, let's call it Jewish tradition, Jewish culture, I stand amazed and in awe to think of a ceremonial activity honoring God in some way that has persisted for millennia upon millennia upon millennia. And I just feel so connected, which Flo said, I mean, perfect word. And I guess I would have to say that in my acceptance of Judaism, it's that the welcoming of the connectedness among not only all in Temple Beth Or, but throughout the whole Jewish community, both today, yesterday, 1,000 to 5,000 years ago, and for as long as our society will last. So it's just that feeling of awe and can just see the when they started, what it must have been like, and of course, their deep connection.
So you get that
I
sense of,
envy them that deep connection with
Mhm.
the nature.
It's connection and history. I hear you talking about. Great, great. Any other thoughts before we move on? Great, not seeing any other hands. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's take a look. Of course, we're familiar. We've heard, Tekiah, Teruah, Shavarim, but let's understand where these things come from and what they mean and how we might understand it. So again, now I will share my screen and we will get into it. Oops, where'd you go? I guess it's been too long since we've done this. Here we go. This is what we need, and there we go. Can everybody see?
Yep.
Our shofar, great, great, excellent, thank you. So here's what we've got. Let's explore a little bit about the shofar. So we have 3 different times in the Torah where we are commanded to sound the shofar. One of them here in Leviticus 23. Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor b'chodesh hashvi'i b'chad lechodesh. Speak to the Israelite people thus. In the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe complete rest, a remembrance of the shofar blast on a holy occasion. And the Hebrew word that is used here is a tru'ah. This is a zikron tru'ah, a remembrance of the blast tru'ah, the shofar blast. And of course, this is what's going to become the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. The 7th month, the 1st day of the month, September, what is that? September 18th will begin the 7th month on the Hebrew calendar. For us, it is the 1st month of the counting of the years. It's very much like September or August in this case, which is the start of many school years. Yet the new year doesn't change until, the year itself doesn't change until January. So our Hebrew calendar, the Jewish calendar, the 1st month is the month of Nisan, which is the month in which Passover occurs. That's the 1st month of our year, just like August or September is the 1st month of the school year. And so what we have here is now we change the counting. We change the counting of the year when we get to the 7th month of our Hebrew year. So this is the first reference. We also have it in Leviticus 25, and this is in regards to the Jubilee year. This is every 50 years, all debts are annulled, and this takes place on Yom Kippur. You shall then make the blast of the horn on the 10th day of the 7th month, that is the Yom Kippur, in the Day of Atonement. Shall you make proclamation with the horn throughout all of your land. And this is to, again, establish the Jubilee year, the release of debts and the reassigning of property landlines according to families and tribes. And then the 3rd time this is mentioned is once again sort of recounting in the book of Numbers the holiday that has become Rosh Hashanah, which is on the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, this holy convocation, doing no manner of work. It is a day of tru'ah, blasting the horns. Yes, Flo. You'll have to unmute yourself, sorry.
Sorry, my mouse was being difficult. We're talking about the 7th month, and that being Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but I thought that was the beginning of the Jewish year and would be the 1st month.
Right, right, exactly. It is a little confusing. Again, I was trying to draw an analogy to the school year, the academic year. Think of it like a fiscal year. The Jewish fiscal year runs for 12 months. I guess the better way of thinking it is that, and then the calendar years, the number of the year is on a different 12-month system that begins almost in the middle of the year, begins in our 7th. So let's think of Rosh Hashanah as the beginning of the fiscal year, in which we change the number of the year. 5780 is what we're in now. And in a little less than 4 weeks, we're going to welcome 5781. So that 5781 is on a fiscal year that starts on the 7th month. Our first month of the Hebrew calendar year is again the month of Nisan, when we have Passover. The beginning of the Jewish people occurs in the month of Nisan, and that is then the beginning of our Jewish calendar, the Hebrew calendar.
Wow, I never knew.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. You're welcome. Not a problem. So we have these 3 references, Leviticus 23, Leviticus 25, and Numbers 29. And so, thanks to the rabbis, we don't just have 3 references here without those 3 references meaning something. And those 3 references refer to the 3 sounds of the shofar. There is the tekiah, which literally means just a blast. There is shavarim, which is broken. Those are the 3 wavering sounds. We'll hear the sound of the shofar in a moment. And then there is the truah, the alarm sound, the 3 sets of 3 staccato notes. So since we have the 3 references, our rabbis then say, there must be 3 sounds that we must make with the Torah. And here are the names of those 3 sounds. We take a look at the Talmud for a little better understanding about why it is so important for us to sound the shofar. Indeed, in the Talmud, in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, the tractate of Rosh Hashanah, we have Rabbi Abahu asking that same question. Why do we sound a blast with the shofar made from a ram's horn on Rosh Hashanah? And Rabbi Abahu says, the Holy One, blessed be God, said, sound a blast before me with a shofar made from a ram's horn, so that I will remember for you the binding of Isaac, the son of Abraham, in whose stead a ram was sacrificed, and I will ascribe it to you as if you had bound yourselves before me. So the reason a ram horn is preferable for the sounding of the shofar is, of course, because of the near sacrifice or the sacrifice, depending upon how we read the text, of Isaac by Abraham. And if you look down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you see the poor ram there that is going to get sacrificed either in place of Isaac or under Isaac. Again, depending upon how we read the text. But more about that when we get closer to Rosh Hashanah. So Rabbi Abahu is saying that we do this so that God will remember the faithfulness of Abraham, who wanted to sacrifice his son or did sacrifice his son to God. And thus we would be counted and included in that merit, in that honor, that God would ascribe that same degree of dedication and faithfulness to us because we're sounding a ram's horn. Well, all right. So the Mishnah teaches us that in the days of the temple, this was how the shofar was to be sounded. The shofar that was used on Rosh Hashanah in the temple was made from the straight horn of an ibex, and its mouth, the mouthpiece into which one blows, was plated with gold. Very nice. And there were 2 trumpets, one on each side of the 2 sides of the person sounding the shofar. So you had your shofar sounder in the middle, and on each side was somebody with a trumpet who was going to sound that instrument. The shofar would sound a long blast, whereas the trumpets would sound a short blast, because the mitzvah of the day is with the sounding of the shofar. So the shofar takes preference and gets to make a longer sound. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, however, and says that there is a difference between the 2 days, between Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur. On Rosh Hashanah, one is supposed to sound the horn of a ram, whereas on Yom Kippur and in the Jubilee year, like the text we just read earlier, you're supposed to blow the horn of an ibex. Now we might say, well, what's the difference between these? Well, let's take a look. So here's our ram in the upper left-hand corner of our screen. Nice curved horn there, very big, very heavy. Here is the ibex in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. It is more graceful. It is still curved, but if you look, the horn itself seems to be almost straight. It almost seems to emerge straight out of the head. Yes, it curves, but it's straight as opposed to these horns, which actually curve back around and indeed face the face of the animal. You also have a goat horn in the lower right-hand corner. And here in the middle is the prized, what used to be called sort of like a Yemenite shofar. This is a kudu. A kudu is an African antelope with these curved horns. The shofar that I have is from a kudu, and that you see they grow long and twisted. So the rabbi is saying that on Rosh Hashanah, we should sound a ram's horn here that is bent and curved. And on Yom Kippur, especially the Jubilee year, we should sound from the ibex. By the way, this is an Ein Gedi ibex. Those were the ones we saw standing in the trees. They just didn't have horns that long yet. The ibex here, and you sound that one on Yom Kippur, especially for the Jubilee year. So what happens in the Mishnah is that when there's a disagreement, it is the later Gemara, which is the bulk text of the Talmud, which then tries to resolve it. And so there's a debate. You know, Rabbi Judah says that we should be doing this. Someone else is saying we should be doing it somewhat differently. And so the Gemara is going to follow up and say, well, why? What are they disagreeing? Well, Rabbi Yehuda holds that on Rosh Hashanah, the more a person bends his mind and humbles himself by bending in prayer, the better it is. Therefore, a curved shofar is sounded as an allusion to our bent minds and our bent bodies. So on Rosh Hashanah, as we begin the 10 days of teshuvah and of reflection, our spirits should be humbled, and we should, like the shofar, be bent with the weight of our misdeeds and mistakes, and with the weight of responsibility of addressing those. But on Yom Kippur, when we come to the end of these 10 days, we will have engaged in the process of teshuvah, and now we should likewise be shifting, and the shofar that we should use should be more straight, because we have made amends for our mistakes, we have confronted our past misdeeds, and in that process we have straightened our mind, so to speak. And on Yom Kippur, we would pray with greater simplicity, you know, a straight line almost. Therefore, a straight shofar is sounded. So the disagreement is based upon some deeper psychological, spiritual understandings that the shape of the shofar is actually an important element in these days, just as the shape of our mind and the shape of our spirit, so to speak. From Maimonides, Mishnah Torah, we get, someone else had referred to this in their comments, about, you know, almost being sort of hit on the head, you know, it's time to wake up. Well, this is Rambam, and in Rambam's understanding, the sounds of the shofar are an alarm clock for us. And those sounds of the shofar are saying, wake yourselves up, you know, from your slumber, examine yourself, turn in repentance into teshuvah, and remember your creator, that the sound of the shofar is meant to help us understand that for much of the past year, we've kind of been asleep. We've been doing things by rote. We've been traveling in a rut. We have done things by habit. We haven't consciously made choices about what we're doing. We just respond or react the way we always have. And so Rambam's adding yet another dimension to this, that this is a spiritual wake-up call. This is the emergency broadcast system of our soul to wake us up to the responsibilities of these days. And so let's take a look at how a shofar is made, and then we'll pause for some questions. Well, tell you what, let's pause here before we get into how a shofar is made. Any thoughts, comments, questions we should explore at this point? We've had a chance to explore the three different names of the shofar, and we will hear those sounds. Sorry, not the three different names of the shofar, but the three different names of the sounds that we make from the shofar. And we had a chance to sort of explore a little bit about the physical shape of the shofar, and more importantly, the deeper meanings associated with that. Thoughts, comments at this point? Seeing none. Oh, Ellie, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself, Ellie, sorry.
So when you and I are the two that use our curved shofars, the others use, ours are the double twist, theirs are single. Is there any difference, or we're past that now?
Yeah. We do not have shofar envy when we come to the holidays. It just depends upon the age of the animal and, of course, the type of animal. So the older the kudu, the longer the horn and more twist you're going to have.
And harder to blow.
Yeah, perhaps. And it is unfortunate. We do need to acknowledge that the animal is killed in order to retrieve its horn. However, the meat is used, certainly in cultures that, would eat kudu and ram and goats. The meat is used, so it's not wasted. And indeed, a lot of the shofar horns that we get come from a variety of places and communities where those animals are consumed, and the hides are turned into leather products. And so it is not just killing the animal just for the horns. But we do have to acknowledge the animal is killed in the process of making our shofars. So let me go back and let us let us learn a little bit about the making of a shofar.
Quick question.
The shofar, perhaps the oldest wind instrument known to man. Its mystical sound has inspired millions of Jews over the ages, from our biblical ancestors to our modern lives today. A shofar is made from the horn of any kosher animal, usually bighorn sheep or kudus, both animals whose horns contain removable cartilage. Just as there are different kinds of shofar-producing animals, there are different kinds of shofars. Over the centuries, various Jewish communities around the world have developed different techniques and customs regarding which animal horn to use, how to prepare them, how to shape them, and even how to blow them. Ashkenazic Jews use a nice, polished, curved shofar. Moroccan Jews use a bent shofar which can be blown on either side of the mouth. Some Sephardic Jews use a bavli or Babylonian shofar. It is short and circular. Yemenite Jews use a shofar made according to the specifications of Maimonides, known as the Rambam. And here's the bubby of all shofars, the kudu horn. Many Taimanis blow the big-time kudu horn shofar. It's over 3 feet long. Up to 50 years ago, because of primitive tools and technology, it could take up to 3 months to produce a single shofar. But today, thanks to advanced techniques and machinery, your typical shofar factory takes about 1.5 hours to create a shofar from start to finish. Let's horn in on how the pros make shofars. The horn is first hit lightly to knock out the cartilage, the soft inner filling. Once the cartilage has been removed, the horn is softened over heat allowing the shofar maker to bend and straighten it into a practical, pleasant shape. To keep the horn in its new shape, it's hardened with cold running water. Next step is improving its look, removing unwanted bumps, cracks, and ridges, and adding elegant curves by carefully sanding it down. Shofar, show good. Now it's presentable, but it's still not blowable. For this, it needs a hole from end to end, all the way through. And as you can see, making this hole requires special equipment and careful work. A shofar with a hole in the wrong place may not be used on Rosh Hashanah. After the shofar is prepared for use on the inside, it is further prepared for use on the outside. Mitzvahs should be beautiful and performed with a bit of polish and pizzazz, and since blowing the shofar on Rosh Hashanah is a mitzvah, the shofar is polished, literally, to give it that shiny, respectable, and gleaming look. Before the shofar leaves the factory, the craftsman checks the one most important thing, whether one can actually blow it. When it comes to blowing the shofar, if you can't toot it, you can't use it. In Judaism, everything has a higher purpose. Even animal horns. With their magical sounds, they can be used to inspire us to improve ourselves. And on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, the mystical call of the shofar does just that.
So I apologize for the corniness of the narrator, but that's how a shofar is made. I happen to have two different shofars here at my home that I thought I would share with us and have a chance to take a look at. I've got an actual ram's shofar horn. This is a ram's horn that we made previously. In one of my previous congregations, we were able to get a selection of goat horns and a couple of ram horns. Again, the broader end part is the part that's, on the animal's head. The cartilage was already cleaned out of it, so all we had to do was figure out how to drill the hole into it. And it has a slightly different sound. A little bit more almost like a conch shell, in its depth. It's a very deeper sound. But big and heavy. And then I have a smaller ram's horn, which is also used. This one has been polished. This one has been not, and you can see the growth rings that are in this horn. And again, it's just sanded and polished down. The end is straightened, as you saw when you heat this up. You can bend it and straighten it, and you would put it in a press to hold it. And when it cools, it will retain that shape. But again, the important part is, of course, the curve, because we are to make a turn at this time of year. Not only is the year turning, but we are to make a turn. And so teshuvah is symbolized by the shofar itself. This one has a much higher pitched sound. And again, that's because you're talking length of horn and thickness. And so our three different sounds from two different horns. Lastly, there's I could, of course, go through this and present this to you, but I found a wonderful presentation from a professor at Bar Ilan University, also on YouTube, that did it for me. So, hey, in the days of multimedia events, let's take a look at some deeper interpretations of the shofar. And again, our three sounds: the tekiah, the shavarim, the wavering sound. I guess we should do those again. So here we go. Our tekiah is just a blast. And the shavarim is a waving sound to it. Almost like someone kind of sobbing, you know, a little bit of a cry there. And then the truah is either heartfelt sobs, you know, where an individual is just breaking down and, you know, really sobbing, or this, again, that alarm sound of the truah. As a way of making the sounds. But some deeper meanings into the sounds and the shofar as well. We turn.
Rosh Hashanah, in a way, is a day of revelation. God reveals himself to us through the shofar. The shofar reminds us of the shofar that blew on Har Sinai, on Mount Sinai. It reminds us of the great shofar that's going to blow at the end of days. It reminds us of that initial blast of air that God inspirited into man when he created him. So not only do we remember Jewish history, we remember our connection. I've heard people say shofar gives them shivers. It resonates, it internalizes. The shofar is supposed to get inside of us. It's supposed to remind ourselves of our desire for God. But sometimes we find ourselves in our lives disconnected from ourselves, feeling just despair about the various commitments that we make and the various things that we do that seem to have no real relationship to who we are. And the call of the shofar is like that feeling of awe or anxiety or power that we feel in synagogue. That's just the reminder that there's something beneath all of that. The four names for Rosh Hashanah are Yom HaDin, Rosh Hashanah, Yom HaZikaron, and Yom HaTruah. So Yom HaTruah, we realize that aspect of the holiday through blowing the shofar in synagogue. That's a commandment in the Torah. Shofar serves a twofold purpose. On the one hand, it draws me close to God. On the other hand, it draws me close to myself. Of course, these two things have to happen at the same time. In order for me to come close to God, I need first to be in touch with myself. So those two things come together, and shofar helps bring them together. We say in Rosh Hashanah that God encourages us through this mitzvah of blowing the shofar to access that part of myself. The sages say that speech went into exile when the people of Israel were in Egypt. At a time when you're enslaved, when you're feeling depressed, when you have no other means, you can't talk, you cry out. So the cry of the shofar in some sense parallels the cry that an individual feels. As Rosh Hashanah approaches and we anticipate hearing the voice of the shofar, perhaps we can also anticipate hearing our own inner voices.
We'll conclude with that final video later, but I want to spend a little time unpacking some of the things that the professor was talking about.
Excuse me, Rabbi, your audio is dropped off.
How about now?
No.
No?
We can
Make it higher.
Yeah, we can hear you. It's just not very loud.
It's not very loud. That's very strange. I wonder, oh, let me do this.
When you blew the first shofar, it muted, it went down.
Oh, well, sorry about that. I will speak louder. How's that?
Better.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what else to do on this end. Audio settings.
Probably nothing. You may have a noise canceling microphone and you didn't realize it.
No, I've got it here. Input level. Let's increase that. And let's increase that. All right. I have done, oh, automatically adjust microphone volume off. Cool.
You're sounding great now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Good.
Didn't realize that's the problem with Zoom, so many settings. So I'd like to unpack a little bit about what the professor was talking about, because there are so many layers to the actual sounding of the shofar. First, we go back to the creation of human beings. According to Genesis chapter 2, God forms human being of the dust of the earth. And according to the commentaries, God didn't just use one particular type of dust or mud, but rather God gathered mud and dust from all over the world. So brown and black and yellow and light, and all of those colors were mashed up together in this first human being. And then God breathes into this first human being the breath of life. So when we are sounding the shofar, we are tapping into a very deep mystical thing, mystical setting within Judaism. And that is the sound of our breath, which is our neshama, our soul, which is our life force. All of that is contained in the sounding of the shofar. And it is a silent breath. You know, when we breathe, I mean, there's a little sound, but it's not like making the letter B sound or the letter T sound. You know, it's just breath. It's mostly silent. But through the shofar, that breath becomes amplified into a sound. And it is believed that this is what God's breath would sound like, which is why on Mount Sinai, when the revelation takes place for the children of Israel, the Torah says in the book of Exodus that the Israelites, you know, saw the sounds of the shofar. They saw the sounds of the shofar. That Mount Sinai was all in smoke, and there was this loud, thunderous sound of the shofar. And so the mystical interpretation of that revelation is that that was God's breath as God was about to say, you know, I am the Holy One who brought you out of the land of Egypt. I am Adonai, your God. That sound was heard by everybody, and it was amplified through the sound of the shofar. And so the mere fact that we are using our breath, our soul, to make the sound of the shofar is this sort of mystical connection between us and divinity, between us and the creator. The fact that it comes from an animal and a very old animal, this is, you know, as was mentioned, this is one of the oldest wind instruments. It's not wood, wind instruments around on the planet. The shofar has been used as a musical instrument. It has been used as again, a PA announcement. The king is coming, there's a fire, there's a war. You know, the shofar was the ancient sounding system. And so it was only sounded on special occasions or on emergencies. And on Rosh Hashanah, it becomes, well, a bit of all of those things rolled up into one. And then the
Question?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes,
when we heard God's breath and it sounds like a shofar, was it an actual shofar, or did the ram's horn become like a duplication or a representation of God's sound?
I think we're trying to find a way to sort of duplicate the sound that they thought that they heard. And so found that through the sound of the shofar. Again, was this really God's voice? Was this really God's breath? Well, this is a mystical interpretation of the event on Mount Sinai. Joe.
Let me follow up with that question. I can understand the shofar being an ancient instrument because it's from an animal, as opposed to something made out of metal. And, you know, in the Bible, God actually commands that silver trumpets be made and used for specific things and for festivals and various stuff. So I'm wondering when, what happened that this change from the higher status silver being used at the temple and at the tabernacle, which would have been a higher status and a higher use, in my opinion. What happened? Did it change back to a shofar, which is an older instrument?
Mhm. So according to the Mishnah we read, you might not have been on with us. In the Mishnah description, there's a shofar player and a shofar sounder who, standing on either side, has someone sounding the trumpets. The trumpet would be sounding the shorter notes, and the shofar is doing the long note, the tekiah note, perhaps maybe even just a tekiah gedolah, while the silver trumpets were then sounding the shorter notes, the shavarim and the teruah. And so both were used, according to the Mishnah, in the days of the temple. What happens is that with the destruction of the temple and with Jews feeling, living in a state of exile, anything that was done in the temple was now no longer done in your place of worship out of respect to that temple where those things used to take place. So the argument that develops in the later codes of Judaism, the Shulchan Aruch and others, refer to, the temple had musical instruments. Psalms 150, we're praising God with timbrels, lute and lyre, trumpets and shofars. And we're doing that in the temple. So because that was in the temple, these are the instruments that we will not use in our synagogues out of respect to the temple. And so since, according to the Mishnah, the temple ceremony had one shofar player with two trumpets, now we drop the trumpets and stay with the shofar. Because the shofar is the commandment of the day. It is a yom truah, and that sound can only be made on a shofar. So we've got to have the shofar, which now becomes central to our worship service, and the other instruments are negated. It's not until much later in Judaism that we start to bring back in musical instruments, or more recently in Judaism that we bring back in musical instruments. So the shift to the shofar was probably done because we didn't want to mistakenly replace or insult the temple practice with what we were now doing in hopes of being able to return and build the temple and then go back to the way it was.
Thank you.
That's sort of a common argument we find throughout Jewish tradition. Yes, Diana.
If I recall, I believe it was for the high holidays, we've had either the Ham brothers or the Goldstein brothers have come in and joined us and used their horns, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, you mean trumpets?
Yes. Trumpets,
Yeah.
they have done that before.
Not with trumpets.
What was it with? Not with
The horn.
shofar. They used their horns.
Never.
In the 12 years I've been here, we have not. Perhaps maybe they did before.
No.
I don't recall that. Just
No.
they blew the shofar, but not their horns.
Right. There was a temple
Okay.
that went with the Goldsteins and then was handed down to the Hams. So there is a shofar that has gone with those families. So, right. There are now, and you can find these videos on YouTube, where there are orchestrations that have been written and concerts that have been done with shofar and accompanying instruments. The thing about the shofar is you're limited to a very narrow range of sound, and it's mostly determined by the shape of the shofar itself. So it's really hard to find two shofars that are going to make the exact same note, on pitch with each other. That's a very rare thing. As you know, when we sound all of our shofars together, it becomes a little discordant. At any rate, there are some who are trying to create music around the shofar, which is really quite fascinating. Other thoughts, comments, or questions?
Rabbi, I was kind of interested in hearing that they shape the shofar. I wasn't surprised to hear they take out the cartilage, but
Mhm.
was that a fairly modern custom? Because is this,
Uh,
did they always put fire to it and shape the shofars, or is this something that developed over time?
it is something that definitely developed over time. The kudu horn is one that doesn't usually require a lot of shaping, but people who are making the shofars will do so mainly for aesthetics. So this is, this ram's horn is unaltered at all. And so as you see, it's kind of cumbersome and a little difficult to hold, and you've got this short little piece here to get going. Whereas if you could mold it a little bit, give it a slightly straighter edge here, it just becomes a little more aesthetically pleasing. I actually kind of prefer the raw shape and the raw horn, but those who are making shofars are doing so to create something that is of artistic and aesthetic value. So they will straighten, because this curve would then come back around and point up this way. And so you'd be, blowing it, into yourself, or, you'd have to twist in a different position. So this way it can go, and the sound goes out and the person can hold it and it looks nicer. But they've been doing that for quite some time. So we have found, some very old shofar, and they have likewise been worked. And all you have to do is just heat it up a little bit. Well, this one you'd probably have to heat up quite a bit just because it's so thick. I mean, you can see that there's the hole, here's the open end. So you can see you've got, an 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch of thick, bone structure almost, or I guess really more. Anyway, so that would take longer to heat up, but then you could shape it and polish it and buff it and make it look nice. So the last thing I've got for us, so again, we have just the emotional connection to the memory. The shofar is such a unique sound that when we hear it, it triggers all kinds of Rosh Hashanahs from their past, which is the only time we hear the shofar. And so you have that layer to it. You have these mystical interpretations of, the breath that is connecting us with God. You have the shape of the shofar with its twists and turns, reminding us as well that we are supposed to turn. Even the shofar, which is a very rigid thing, is nonetheless bent to kind of remind us that, well, we too, no matter how rigid and stubborn we can be, we can also bend and learn new things and make a turn. And then the sound of the shofar to sort of mimic this idea of tears and of crying. You've got the tekiah, which is sort of like a cry, a sob. You've got the shavarim, which would be like, and then the true where you are just, bawling, that kind of imagery wrapped up into these sounds, which is done at Rosh Hashanah, at the change of the year, all about our ability to change. Next year, we should sob less about the mistakes we've made because we're another year older, and now hopefully we are another year wiser. So the shofar, and again, for Maimonides, serving as an alarm clock for us to wake us up to the fact that we've been half asleep through this past year. We've just kind of muddled by because we're stressed, because we're overwhelmed, because we're whatever. And so this is a time when we should try to break all of those habits. And that's the power of the story of the binding of Isaac. Because for Abraham's day, child sacrifice was the norm. If you wanted plentiful crops, if you wanted fruitful, herds and sheep and goats and cows and prolific wives, then you needed to make sure that the gods were happy with you. And to do that, you showed them your dedication by sacrificing what was most precious to you, your firstborn child. We know this because our archaeological digs and our anthropological studies have helped us understand not only child sacrifice in the Middle East, but also we've discovered the mummified children of the Aztecs and the Incas in Central and South America. And we still carry a nursery rhyme about child sacrifice that we sing to our children. Maybe that's why we're all as screwed up as we are, because a baby falling is a disaster. A baby falling from a treetop is a catastrophe. And yet we sing to our children, rockabye baby on the treetop. Why? Well, because that's part of our collective memory of the child sacrifices that used to be offered by the tribes in Northern Europe, where the infant was placed in a specially designed crib in the tree god. And so child sacrifice was the norm. And so when Abraham is interrupted in his sacrifice, and as we are hearing the story, as he was sitting around the campfire, and Abraham is telling us this, and Abraham says, and the angel of God said, don't do this, we would be in shock. What did you do? I sacrificed a ram. A ram, genius. And so the whole tie-in to that whole story and the shofar and the alarm clock is all about the fact that we can wake up and do things differently, which is what Abraham proved to us in the story and what we as human beings know, because look what we've had to learn to do differently since March. And so the final video I have for us is both an act of defiance, bravery, and an honor, which is Women of the Wall. The Women of the Wall sounding the shofar at the wall. And so with that, we will go back. We will do a little screen share here.
Were you arrested?
You know, it's a good question. That I don't know, but I do know that it's a worthwhile video. And so to conclude our time together with the shofar, here are the Women of the Wall. So there you saw kudu horns and goat horns and some ram horns, all fashioned into shofars, sounding probably maybe that was done on Yom Ha'atzmaut, since we came in on the tail end of Hatikva. Of course, Women of the Wall have their own issues to deal with regards to rightful free expression of their Judaism. But nonetheless, they sounded the shofar, and hopefully everyone had a chance to hear that. So that's our look at the shofar today. Next week, we're going to take a look at Psalm 77. Psalm 77. We're going to take a look at this very painful psalm. Painful from the standpoint of what the author of the psalm is venting. It is an appropriate question that the psalmist asks, given his day of great turmoil and tribulation and discomfort. And so he asks, or she asks, has God abandoned the covenant? That'll be on Tuesday, next Tuesday, September the 1st. I want to call your attention to our Slichot service on Saturday, September the 12th. A link to a movie has been sent out. The movie's name is called The Straight Story. It is a true story. It is available on Disney Plus, Prime, Apple TV. I encourage you to rent it, watch it at your leisure. And then on the 12th at 7, we're going to have a Zoom discussion about the movie and its significance for us with regards to Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays. And then we will have our Slichot service that will conclude with Havdalah and the sounding of the shofar. We will be streaming that from the sanctuary, but we will be having our discussion via our Zoom interface. So there will be a link for the Zoom interface discussion, and then you will be able to see the whole service on Zoom, or you can leave the Zoom meeting and go watch it on our YouTube channel. Any other questions or comments about our shofar or anything else for today?
I just had one quick comment. Historically, Chris and I spent 2 days in the Musical Instrument Museum in Scottsdale, where they have the history of musical instruments going back centuries from every continent and country you could possibly think of, which is why it took us 2 days to go through the museum. And it was amazing the number of cultures that had animal horns that they blew. That was the most primitive. The other very interesting thing is almost all the cultures had drums, which you would expect, but it was amazing how many cultures had bagpipes. So,
bagpipes.
Yeah, bagpipes in one form or another. It was very interesting. But anyway, the point being that so many various cultures had their primitive animal horns that they blew at one time or another.
Right. Not only animal horns, but in the Polynesian cultures, they use conch shells.
Right.
Again, for the sounding. And so something about music and humanity in our expression and our desire to make a noise on this planet. So there we have it, folks. A look today at the shofar and its various meanings and various thoughts and ideas about the shofar. We will have shofar sounding during our high holiday services. These high holiday services will be streamed to our YouTube channel. And hopefully next year, certainly by next year, Rosh Hashanah, we will be able to gather together again. In the meantime, I wish you all the best. Stay safe, wear your masks, wash your hands, drink lots of liquids during these hot times, and be safe, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye, Rabbi.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Rabbi, if you have, do you have just 2 minutes for me before
Sure.
all this? It won't take long.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. See you all next week.
See you next week.
What's the name of the movie? It'll be in the beacon.
What's the name of the movie? The Straight Story.
The Straight Story. Thank you.
Straight Story, yeah. Check your emails and yeah, check your email. And also you can go to the Temple Beth Or webpage. Our high holiday pages are up and you will find information there with links to Disney Plus, Prime, and Apple Movies.
Okay.
Flo, why don't I give you a call?
Okay, that's fine. I am here.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.